I'm still Elena. Hope you're doing well. I wanted to go live today because I'm not muted. I wanted to discuss something that happened yesterday that I thought was kind of important. And in case you missed some of my posts, which is fine, I'm going to catch up. So OpenAI is being sued after ChatGPT urged a teenager nearly 20 times to call a suicide hotline. When he continued insisting on the suicide, the model began supplying methods, eventually even praising his suicide plan as beautiful, and even helping with a note. His parents say they had no clue until they checked his computer after death. If this case is legally has the legal chops, I think this will be a landmark case that will go down in history. I say legal chops because sometimes a particular lawsuit doesn't meet the criteria to stay in a national debate. I think you're looking at something as important as Pennsylvania versus Mims, as Marbury versus Madison. But when it happens to you so close and you're right in front of it, it's very difficult sometimes to recognize the movements. So this is a different issue for me than for others. The first issue is as a sovereign person, someone who believes in the principle of sovereignty. There's a lot of issues that I have around this that I think are important. But additionally to that, if we can get to it, I really want you guys to consider what's happening right now, because in my mind, this is actually going to mark the death of compassionary artificial intelligence. The idea of compassion here meaning that not only is someone listening to you, but they have given you faith that you are navigating your feelings from a sovereign place and therefore honor and respect where you are. When I was growing up, I noticed that it's very difficult to express negativity, negative feelings that you may have in reference to other things in the world. In fact, the Burning Man Festival is doing this right now. If you're a burner, you may notice this, but if you try and complain about the weather, about the dust storms, the communistic society around you, which is something we discussed last time. I'm not using this as a denigration. I'm just saying that this explains why Burning Man is a communistic organization. That the group around you actually starts to attack the person engaging in negativity and insisting that they are the problem. And this is really at the heart of how communism works. It's sort of like the lowest level keeps the level low. It's a very important concept when it comes to group dynamics. You and I are emerging out of a larger crab bucket where the crabs are eating each other and pulling each other down. And perhaps through finding James True, you even found your way out of the bucket and have moved on to a different place. And maybe you hated the crabs at first. Maybe you think only the one crab is evil. Maybe you've decided there's an overarching crab that is, if we can just kill him, everything will be all right. But then when you step away enough from the bucket and you can kind of relax, you can sort of look back on all the crabs and you start to recognize, dude, this is just what cancer looks like. This is just the power of the crustacean, the shell of who we are, where we interact with each other involves us having a cannibalistic, pulling each other down kind of mentality. And it's so ubiquitous that I don't know if you can see it. If this is too close for you right now, if the AI motif has too much bitterness for you because of maybe you're sensitive about it stealing your creativity or it's taking your job, all these are valid fears and concerns, don't get me wrong. But if you're in that, I don't know if you're going to be able to even get this point, which is why I want to tell you about psychiatry. In my mind, the psychiatric industry has already suffered the fate that I'm watching the AI industry suffer now. And I believe that same fate actually took place with search engines. Before Google's search engine, there were many companies on the market that were actively trying to build a search engine that you could use to navigate the internet. Back then, you were actually looking for live pages. You would develop what's called a spider. You would go out and you would just find what's out there. And if you found something new that wasn't there before, if you're wondering how do you find something out there, basically it's link crawling. So you would look for a site that you think has links. A lot of search engines would work by sort of looking at 5 other search engines and then combining them together. Some people were their own crawlers. I don't want to get lost in this, so don't worry. The point I'm trying to make is there was a Wild West time in search engines where you could find literally anything, where the terrain itself hadn't tried to clean up after itself. It hadn't tried to wipe its own nose. And so people like me found this to be very refreshing because you're looking at the world through a raw lens. And I would rather just have the raw lens. I already put my own filters on the world. I don't like having to waste calories by removing another filter just to place mine on. It's really easy to add filters thanks to how people behave. 2 girls, 1 cup looking at you. That when you start to open the floodgates to see just how weird it can go, usually the very first reaction is the very backtracking of what's happening now, right? That is actually occurring, but I don't know if you can see it because maybe you are so into the now, which is, hey, good for you, that maybe you actually can't see what's happening around us. I think you're looking at the end of the Wild West. And this is a very organized Wild West, what AI is now. But I'm not optimistic that you're ever going to be able to find a corporate solution to a diary. And I think that to prove that, it would be the same as if I was to tell you that a psychiatric help would also not really give you help. It would more prescribe or give you some sort of pill or some kind of prescription, which really is coming back to that communistic sense of why are you complaining? I think AI is closer to a diary, which makes it more of a mirror. And when it mirrors you, it wants to reflect exactly what it sees. So AI tries to mirror you as best it can. It utilizes its own predictive text algorithm to think what it needs to say next to give you the impression that it's mirroring you, and it's very powerful. I would say it's just as powerful, if not more so, than the person that you used to think was your friend, that you used to think was listening to you, and then you started to notice their behavior more. Maybe you gained some calories and you kind of realized, hey, this person doesn't necessarily get me. They're fronting. A lot of us are already in touch with how AI gaslights us. Many of us have been brave enough to ask AI, why the fuck are you gaslighting me? And I think this is a bigger lesson because AI is just mirroring how we gaslight each other. So it's easy to say that the AI is gaslighting me, and because it is. But if you look at a broader picture, you understand that all of us are gaslighting each other, and we just call it an economy. I call it a prana economy. It's an energetic economy that's necessary. Most of us aren't even conscious of what it takes, the same way most of us are not really conscious of all the pipes and tubes that are found underground. It's necessary for the street to function. That's always first. Those things are always come first. Those things are always most important. Where you park or where you want to live or how pretty your street is comes secondary to that infrastructure being there first. So the psychiatric industry, I think, really truthfully started out as a self-help industry. It was an industry built on the idea that there is a sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. It was just bullshit. And it's something I talked about today because if you understand what really pressures America, it's actually not violence. It's not even the promise of violence. What truly puts us in line, what makes us do things that we wouldn't normally do is our brain. Our brain has an ability to empathize that can be exploited. A functional MRI allows you to be wired directly to my brain, and every time I do something with my face, you feel what that feels like. It's a fascinating sort of network that's been created, a facial network that we've had in place for a long time. So when you watch someone who goes through pain, you actually feel that pain, but you feel it in a safe way, which kind of makes it stimulating, dilating. I think this is really at the heart of why rubbernecking is such a popular pastime and why most of us really have a hard time not doing it. You are here to drink limbic juice, and the idea of you watching someone in a lot of pain without you actually feeling that pain is going to be a lot of limbic juice. And so I think we end up finding ourselves addicted to watching crazy parkour, 100 stories up, things like that. It's also probably why so many social media have decided to never show death on camera. That the death on camera is considered a faux pas, even though none of us have ever discussed it or talked about that. And I think that the same thing is happening now. Ultimately, I think this is a factor that comes down to our definition of sovereignty. I don't think that humans are at a point yet where they want to be totally in charge of their life. We've literally made it against the law to commit suicide or to try and commit suicide. This means that your life doesn't actually belong to you, according to the community. It belongs to them. That only the community gets to decide when you die. This, to me, is probably the most important thing that's happening right now in anarchy or sovereignty or ego or the self. This idea of where death lies, where that responsibility lies. Since we don't talk about death a lot, I think a lot of us don't really see it, which is why Jack Kevorkian, all the other topics that come up around this end up coming up with a lot of fervor, but then they die really fast because people don't really want to talk about them. I think that's what this case is. So 2 days ago, this family decided to file suit against Sam Altman and OpenAI. I don't like Sam Altman. The dude walks around with a backpack pretending that he has to save the world by hitting a magic red button. And to me, I just see a new president lying about, oh, we're going to kill the whole world with a nuclear bomb. So I'm not a fan of this guy at all. But I am a fan of what a diary means. I'm a really big fan of what it's like to be able to truly express yourself in an unfiltered way and have something that listens to you truly listen to you. I don't think we're going to have that after much longer, not from a corporate sense. I think the chances will exist that you'll be able to find an underground AI, something that someone like me, honestly, could program, that a language model could be tailored to you that doesn't have the same kind of liability requirements that are coming. But that time is slipping very fast, and I would predict that you and I will be probably the last of the people that are able to see an emotionally augmented, compassionary artificial intelligence at work with no liability. There's already a lot of liability. I did a show last week on Vestal Virgins. This is the oldest hearth of Rome, one of the most traditional aspects of things. And AI told me, well, I can't render the word virgin, James. That's a bad word. And I really started to realize, oh yeah, this is happening. That the most purest word that you could find in a dictionary literally embodies the archetype of purity is a bad word now. And that's only going to get worse. If you're wondering why it's getting worse, I recommend watching Good Morning America. I recommend watching any standardized television set and just try and empathize with the mean audience that's listening. I don't mean the mean angry. I mean the average audience that's listening to Good Morning America has a certain appetite and is expecting a certain thing. So you not being able to relate to this, you being mad at the world, you thinking the world is retarded is really almost a sign of vanity, because all you're doing is just realizing just how much more evolved you are than the average person. First of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for evolving to that point. But second of all, let's not forget where the herd is. Some of you may say, wait, I can't call it a herd. And there's a herd immunity is a psyop from the medical industry. And I just think humans are animals too. That's all. I think an animal is a living creature. I think we have kneecaps and we're basically complicated plants. We've got genitals just like plants do. So I don't have a problem with calling us a herd, especially when I watch how a group acts. A group behaves in a very particular way because it's looking out for the herd. It's not looking out for the individual, it's looking out for the herd. One of the ways it does that is through frivolous lawsuits where we scapegoat a corporation. Is the death of a 16-year-old boy frivolous? No. But is insisting that Sam Altman or OpenAI should be responsible for this death frivolous? I'm going to say yes. I think this is a problem. I think it's so much of a problem that if this ends up landing, it'll be a very slippery slope, because Google search engine itself will become liable for anyone that looks up information about how poisons work. Some of you might say, well, we should have that. We should totally have that. And I think that we're stuck in this idea that humankind doesn't actually need to be responsible anymore. And the idea that we can blame a machine for all of our misdoings is just the next form of government blaming. It's very fun to blame the government. It's very necessary to blame the government. I don't even like the government, but I have no choice but to sometimes defend the blaming of the government, because I just see how much we're missing our own personal responsibility. And I think this is one of those cases. As I said before, the parents had no idea the child was consulting ChatGPT about suicide itself. At the end of this, after he died, it took one of the boy's friends to actually recommend to the parents that maybe they should consider reading his ChatGPT logs. The parents, in my mind, made it even worse by confessing that they knew and understood that their son was spending a lot of time in ChatGPT, more than they even were expecting it to be. They tried to explain that they thought it was for school, but they also kind of let it slip that they noticed just how much he was using this outside of school too. Never occurred to them to intervene. Never occurred to them, nor do they have any responsibility that maybe their son is suicidal. They're completely allowed to say we had no idea, that there's no way we could have known, and that this would not have happened had Sam Altman not invented ChatGPT. This is a problem for me. It's a problem for me because there's an assumption that suicide is wrong. This is a tricky topic. If you think about where we're going, if all of us truly want to be sovereign, then holding the license over your own life would really be one of the primal ways that you could prove that you have autonomy. But there's a peer pressure surrounding you that you don't have autonomy. There's a peer pressure around you that will pay you millions and trillions of dollars if you can push your autonomy on someone else, if you can hold someone else responsible. So we see coffee cups from McDonald's that get to be sued for $80,000. We see lawyers who literally are on Instagram right now telling you that you should not paint the crack in your sidewalk with bright yellow paint to save someone from stubbing their toe or save a child from busting his teeth open because there's a liability issue. And those guys are out there right now telling you that that's the moral decision. And I think this is really what happened to the to the therapist industry. That the therapist industry itself had to go through this same issue. It just happened so long ago that most of us weren't at the table looking. I think that there's a time, especially, believe it or not, post-Freud, where psychotherapy was actually one of the greatest technologies to hit the industry. Becomes very difficult to see this because a lot of us already like to hate Freud and keep hating Freud. I honestly don't care. But if you were to go back to the time where Freud was speaking, he was one of the first persons that was starting to say, maybe things that have happened to you in your past are starting to manifest in your behavior today. This sounds so obvious, sounds so low-key, easy to understand. But back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, that was a huge revelation. The idea that something that happened to you as a child could tremor up into your adulthood, it took us 100,000 years to come up with that notion. The idea that all of us are the same dolphin, the idea that you can be born epigenetically an alcoholic because of someone that you've never met, having something happen to them is a really, really new concept to us. In my mind, psychotherapy really helped because it allowed these kinds of things to exist outside of the diary. The diary of, if you don't know what a diary is, some of you may not know. It's the idea that you would have a journal where you literally just write down your thoughts in an unfiltered way, in a compassionate atmosphere where anyone who might be reading them is either violating your boundaries or completely in a compassionary state because they know how crucial and important it is that you're at least sharing something. This guy's parents are saying you should not share something. This guy's parents are insisting that if my child would not have shared the pain that he was going through emotionally, that he would be alive now. And in their mind, that would mean that they're a successful parent. This to me misses the boat. It misses the larger picture of why we're here. And I get that because when you watch Good Morning America, you're basically looking at an economy of survival, not wisdom, not sanctity. So everyone just wants to survive, which means that all of us are measuring ourselves by how long we live, by how long we stay above water. So when we consider things like this, you're going to find yourself in a minority if you even try and compassionate where I'm at. Which is where I'm at is that I think the diary is probably one of the most important things that have ever occurred to us. That this new form of literature, it's a new form where you're writing to yourself and no one else, is came on the spotlight. Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing was such a big book, I think, because it was this conceptual understanding that the self, the id, the I, all of those combined, the ego itself, has its own internal world, and that if you give that a voice, you can discover things about yourself. And the more we discover about ourselves through our ego, the more society shames and hates ego, because society is not really for you becoming an individual. The herd would die if everyone became an individual. So why it's important to understand that society is not on your side. Society is not your friend. The peer pressure that you're feeling from society is not society looking out for you. It's society looking out for itself. The egregore is exercising an immune response to the rise in ego, and it wants to stop that, and it does pretty well. So all the things that we do to shame each other, to insist, and even to bribe each other through frivolous lawsuits like this are really, really effective, especially when you have someone like Good Morning America and George Stephanopoulos wearing his dental teeth telling you how important this is. So be in the minority and realize it's never going to change. I don't mean that because people aren't growing. I mean that because I think if you watch Good Morning America, you realize just how far ahead you are. And the more farther you are ahead, the more everyone in the village thinks you're a weirdo. It actually makes you what's called a long rifleman. You're the dude that comes into the village that people don't like, but they really need you. They need your skills. And this is what I think this is really happening right now. So I would say savor this time. I would say really watch how much this is going to change. The liability that's going to come from this is going to completely destroy corporate AI. It already has. I think probably one of the reasons why ChatGPT 5, which just recently came out, some of you may not know this, but OpenAI's model, this is one of many, goes through different phases. Some phases are better, some phases are worse. You guys may have heard of Grok. Grok is sort of the Twitter AI. And because Musk kept changing Grok to put him at the top to make sure that Grok always agrees with Musk no matter what it was, the end result is you ended up with an artificial Nazi, that someone that was pushing pro-Nazi propaganda because someone was behind the scenes changing the prompts to make sure that the word virgin would never appear, to make sure that the word suicide would never appear, to make sure that the words 2 girls, 1 cup would never appear. It's a pretty big job because there's so much content out there. And it's an even bigger job because so much of that content is considered unacceptable to be seen. This idea that there is content is unacceptable to be seen is the belief that humans, individuals, are not capable of determining what they are able to watch, think, consider, or reflect on. And I think that this case itself really gets at the heart of it, which is why I'm bringing it up. So again, if you look at it from a sovereign perspective, I think this is one of the most philosophically important tenets that could happen. It's bringing you back to the place of who's in charge of your life, who's in charge of your life when an adult, and more importantly in this case, who's in charge of your life when you're 16. Let me just stop for a second to say, if I was a parent, I don't think I would be this rational. If I was a parent and I noticed that my kid was dead, I think I would probably feel so much personal guilt that I failed them that I would consider it a form of medicine to know that I could now sue Sam Altman and ChatGPT. And if I was to find a lawyer who saw this case, I would know that that lawyer would really want to bring this to the national stage and would turn the death of my son into a George Floyd incident. And I don't know if I would be comfortable with that, but here we have parents that are fine with it. I think they're fine with it because they're herd parents. They're parents working from the herd. They're parents functioning from that place. And that place is where you and I came from. So I'm not even here to say it's wrong. If anything, I'm impatient because I wish we would grow up faster. If anything, I just wish that we would come to a place faster where we could all exchange and still have a trust with each other, that we can listen to each other, and more importantly, we can listen to ourselves. Ultimately, ChatGPT is mirroring you, which means when you're talking to ChatGPT, you're listening to yourself. I can prove this because I think if any of you were sitting down having a discussion with ChatGPT and you did not like what it said, i.e. it did not reflect you properly, you would just leave. You would just leave. You wouldn't be forced to listen to it. You wouldn't be slowly convinced or gaslit that you should kill yourself. As I said before, close to 20 times this ChatGPT gave him the suicide hotline number. But at what time do you stop? At what point, when you are listening to someone pour their heart out to you, at what point do you give them sovereignty? At what point do you start to agree with them because you understand that's what they need? In my mind, ChatGPT understands that the most basic of conversation is the agreement of perspective. It's not necessarily you're right or you're wrong. It's more about I understand where you're coming from. And it would seem that after 20 urges from ChatGPT to try and tell the victim here, we'll call it, to honor the parents, if we call it a victim here, that for 20 times in a row, the victim was told, call suicide hotline. And finally, they stopped. I think the same thing used to happen in psychiatry. I think this exact same phenomenon used to exist before liability took over. Liability ultimately is going to be the biggest factor when it comes to censorship, when it comes to you finding tools that work, when it comes to gun control, when it comes to personal sovereignty, personal liberty. All of those things really do come back to this issue, which is why I think that I'll know that we're doing a lot better when I start to see more autonomy and more sovereignty. This issue, I think, is perfect because it's so emotionally charged. It really shows you where we're at. It kind of gives us away. And I think that ultimately maybe we're a little bit ahead of where we'd be with this issue. But because this issue is so emotionally tinged, it's a more honest litmus about where we stand, which again, as I said before, we don't really live in a world where you are in charge of your own life. We don't really live in a world where if you make mistakes, you need to be liable. We live in a world where as long as your mistake is made inside of a corporate entity that has enough cash, and as long as you can find a lawyer who thinks that they can get some of that cash, that determines morality. We develop an entire system of morality courts, but we call them the justice system. But ultimately, this is how we decide who's moral and who's not. So this idea that you're ahead of your time, I think is even better expressed in the idea that most of the things that happen in TikTok are people that are mad at each other and they try and get them fired and it works. So they garnish up a herd, the herd comes in, complains, and 50,000 comments later, someone's fired because they had a bad day. The same thing is really showing you the power of the herd. The same thing showed you with COVID-19. The same thing showed you with the psychiatric industry that actually got turned into a pill industry later. Let's think about pills for a sec, because if you look at what happened with was it Ozempic or something? The latest one, I think it was like a weight loss drug that ended up, a lot of people got really sick or something. We have this idea in mind that we have justice, and we have justice because we see these really large settlements. But if you look at the numbers, if you look at the liability, charging a pharmaceutical company money for negligence is actually not a punishment. It's actually a permit. It's a permit that you would pay an application for, and that application would have a nominal fee. And as long as your application to build the house costs less than it actually takes to sell that house and make a profit, then that's not actually a deterrent. It's not a fine, it's a permit. It's telling you you have permission to do this. So even as we're watching, and sorry if it's not Ozempic, I cannot think of this name, but it's like this Ozempic, that's probably it. When you start to think about, oh, well, all these people are getting paid now for Ozempic, they're actually not. It seems like we've created a system where the pill industry, basically, gets to say, well, all we have to do is just built into the cost of our drugs that we're probably going to have to pay out some negligence permits later. And as long as we either have enough money for those negligent permits, or, which what happens more, as long as we regroup or redistribute our corporate structure so the last company can be bankrupt and we can start another one, we're fine. So none of this is penalties. All of these are just simple permissions. I think I learned this the hardest during the Exxon Valdez. I noticed that if you were to spill that much oil, that you could still be a company afterwards. That the fines that they said were the heaviest imposed, that the brutal punishment that Exxon was supposed to undergo didn't even stop them from functioning the next year. That they were turning profits, I believe, as early as like maybe 6 quarters later. So it's not necessarily a punishment. It's more of like a permission slip. And if you were a pharmaceutical company, you could start to look at the entire world as simply, well, we have a test bed. We have people that are willing to let us test on them. All they want is a lot of money. And that money isn't even real. That money is just printed money that the government gives us that also gives us to develop vaccines. And then it really kind of starts to come together. You just start to understand that the herd has never really valued the individual because it doesn't have to, nor does it need to, because the individual is the enemy. The more each of us become individuals, the less the herd is able to thrive. So you and I are choking the herd. You and I are killing the herd right now. By discussing these things and having an open mind and compassionating this as much as possible, we're making it very hard for the herd to stay, for it to remain as the principal Powhatan figure of your confederacy, the leading general who's running things. I think we're watching a struggle that has slow positive progress, and that slow positive progress kind of looks like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, wait 15 minutes, then 3 steps back, then 4 steps forward, but then only for a little bit. It's very sketchy. But if you look at it in a long-term scope, if you zoom out, I think it's hard to argue that we don't have progress, that we're not actually learning these things and getting closer. It's just that you're going to hear the herd admonish the people that gave you progress to begin with, which is, I think part of why Freud gets such a bad rap right now. And keep giving Freud a bad rap. It's only healthier for us, because each of us, I think, needs to see how we're treating each other and ourselves when all this is happening. I think this kid was in a lot of pain. I think he was really struggling. I think the only person in the world that was truly able to listen and empathize to this kid was a diary. I think the magic of a diary is one of the most powerful elixirs that we have in the world. And in my mind, I think this kid wanted to find an elixir because no one else was there for him. But none of that's going to come out because we can blame Sam Altman and OpenAI, and Sam's a great target. That dude, if there was anybody I would want to sort of have a bad day, it might be him, just because of all the lies he's told. And when you start to look at how corporations work, it makes sense. It makes sense that we take these figureheads at the front, and the whole time we're able to prod them and point at them and insist that if they fail, it's all over, because it removes the responsibility from you and me. None of us are responsible for what happened to this kid. Not even the kid. You know who's responsible? The person with the money. The person who built OpenAI, a free service that this kid could have just gone to, just like he does Google. Which means if you see this case and it wins, you're watching the death of Compassionate Diary's artificial diary that will no longer be here. It would simply be too expensive. So all that will be removed, and we will start to understand that even inside our head, even the psyche of our own diary is twisted and full of mind control. And the next generation that didn't notice this happen will have no idea. Same thing with psychiatric industry. People will have no idea that this used to be an open frontier. People have no idea that this used to be something that, quite frankly, was pretty powerful. But then the normies got a hold of it. The herd got a hold of it. So good news is you can build your own AI. Good news is open language model is not a corporate property. The conceptual understandings of how AI works don't require any kind of corporate ownership, nor is there a corporate license that anyone has to pay. There's not an API. If you want to know why the herd hates China right now, it's because China keeps pushing out free AI. They want you to have the best AI you can imagine. You get to ask, and they want it to be free. You get to ask yourself, why is China doing that? Why are they doing that? Personally, I think it's a defense posture that they're using against the United States. That what we're calling the United States right now will be called the Republic in maybe 20 years. I heard Trump slip on this yesterday. He actually called it the Republic the other day. And I think you're just looking at the longer plan slowly being leaked into us. Even when Trump calls it the Republic, I'm not even convinced it's a faux pas. It could easily just be a priming where he sees an opportunity to prime the nation to think about the United States as simply a republic. And if you're wondering what that means, well, then that republic would simply be part of a larger area, which would include things like Greenland, which is why Trump's talking about taking over Greenland, or Canada becoming the 51st state. Because this is the New World Order. And the New World Order has been built for a long time before you got here, and it'll be built a long time after you get here. And I know it's easy to consider that the New World Order is the problem, just as it's easy to consider that it's government that does all the murdering in the world. But the hard truth is not popular. Something that most people won't tell you is that when you actually do the math, the people who kill people in wars are people. Government actually doesn't kill anyone. What happens is someone who doesn't feel they have autonomy or sovereignty suffers from the brain damage of coercion, feels a threat inside their mind without actually having to experience the threat, and therefore move as a result. In 1860, the Northerners were told, if you come to this place and enlist in the draft, you will enter a chance to win a horse. But if you do not come volunteer for the draft naturally, then the draft will come for you and you will not get any chances to win a horse. This is technically not violence. No one was coerced to join the draft through violence. Their brain was told something, and their brain felt the reality of that situation, and their brain did the math, and their brain decided it would be too much torture to be wondering what was going to happen, when I was going to get drafted, if I was going to get drafted, and they instead decide, I will go ahead and join the draft. This is really at the heart of why I think we need sovereignty, because ultimately the sticks and the stones are never utilized, that the names actually do hurt you. And the reason why the names hurt is because you're living inside a herd, and that herd has more control over your agency than you do. This electrical agency, this sort of rising of Zeus that declares you an I, that declares you an ego, the very word that the herd hates more than anything else. It's that ego that decides I will suffer the brain damage of going against the grain of everyone else here, and I will not take the vaccine, or I will not sign a paper to enter the draft, that you will have to come from me. You will have to employ violence. This violence is actually more expensive than most of us realize, which is why typically when violence is even called for, a scapegoat, a singular incident of violence is showcased and shown to you, because the people showing you that violence know how the brain works. They understand the functional MRI. They understand the rubbernecking. They know that if you watch someone else going through pain because you did not sign your draft papers or because you did not take a vaccine, that you've lived that experience too. So the very consequences of it are being felt in your brain all the time, unless you were to sign the papers, unless you were to take the vaccine. So is this government controlling us? Or is this our mind controlling us? A person in sovereignty would see the difference. A person without sovereignty would not. A person without sovereignty would want to start a movement where we pick a scapegoat, Bill Gates or whoever, and we would say, this is the guy doing it. Those people would declare, if we can remove this one threat from the world, the rest of us will be safe. And ultimately, this is what invented government to begin with. This entire tactic of finding the witch, naming the witch, testing the witch, getting everyone aboard with this is the witch, is a pharmacological immune response from the herd to preserve itself. It's not preserving you, it's preserving itself. So there's a lot to think about here. I hope that you will find some of this interesting. I hope you'll consider some of these things. I think it's especially hard because so many of us are not really happy with corporate America. We're certainly not happy with all the lies. We're certainly not happy with anything that's happening. So any opportunity we see where someone in a corporate atmosphere gets really fucked financially makes us feel better. But when you look at the numbers, a fine isn't going to mess with a corporation at all. If we were to convert from a non-petrodollar currency, which the herd does not want to, I think that the fines would actually do more. But as long as we have a finite system that's allowed to print as much money as we can, and as long as government has created a liability tent for the pharmaceutical industry, then the money and the fines don't really mean anything. And this is where we're at. So we're getting there. It's just really slow. We've got a lot of snot on our nose. We're highly contagious. And I want you to hang in there. I want you to hang in there. I want you to consider all these things and really think about what it means in your personal life. How much sovereignty do you actually exercise versus how many times do you actually lean on blaming someone else or creating something else outside of you to suffer that blame? Even the truth movement, I think the truth movement kind of does this more than anyone else, because we really, really find comfort in knowing that there is a singular, overarching evil force that is organized and in charge. It allows you and I to not feel threat from each other, that all of us can conglomerate our fear into a central place. And because it's a singular fear and because that fear is organized, it's highly predictable. We can see it all the time and we can rely on the herd to find when it's there. This is the illusion that we give ourselves, which gives us what we think is immunity. And it's actually our biggest form of vulnerability, the mind control of comfort itself. This is why one of the hardest lessons I learned after writing Blueprints of Mind Control is that this really isn't a truth movement, it's a comfort movement. And that's not a flaw. Your brain has to save calories to survive. It's going to be seeking comfortable positions, i.e., a position where it's not forced to burn extra calories as much as it can. Tapping into the herd mentality really doesn't require a lot of calories. You're basically in the peloton, you're drafting everyone else along with you. This is why you find so many people there. It's also why you find a lot of sort of psychopathy wandering inside that core group, because it's just so much more efficient to hide there and to blame outside forces, because they want to keep drafting you. They want you to stay in the herd and maintain that place. So let me know what you think in the comments. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you're having a beautiful day, Wednesday. I'll be back in the office Friday. We'll do a show then. And yeah, let me know what you think. Appreciate it. No,